Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Dees, and I'm a senior at the University of Florida studying telecommunications news. And we just want to welcome you all to our very first episode of the Conversations from Cypress podcast and YouTube channel.
I'm Jordan Ellis. I'm a senior at the University of Florida studying Media and Society Telecommunications, and I'm super excited to be with my two friends here to hopefully just educate people on disabilities and empower other people with disabilities.
And I'm Robin. I'm a junior here at the University of Florida studying sports media. Like Jordan and Drew, I also have cerebral palsy. And, for our first episode of the podcast, we wanted to focus on the Americans with Disability Act. So Sunday, July 26th is its 30th anniversary since it was passed. And for those of you who don't know, the Americans with Disability Act aims to prohibit discrimination in all areas of public life against people with disabilities. So that's in employment. That means like access to public buildings and things like that. So for our first guest, her name is Shevie. She was Miss Wheelchair Florida in 2018, right, Drew?
Correct. She is a powerhouse and a tireless advocate. So please welcome our first guest, Shevie Barnes. A little brief synopsis of who you are, just so we can get to know you a little better.
Well, I'd say that I'm a regular person, but I am a teacher. I am a pretty active disability advocate, and I too have a pretty big goal of, educating and empowering just people, with or without disabilities. So definitely when you guys asked, I was like, yeah, sure thing. Definitely there. And interesting facts about me: I am terrified by mascots. I don't like them at all in any way. And my favorite food is ice cream.
Awesome. So actually, Chevy, I didn't even know that fun fact about you about mascots. So we learn something new every day. So in regards to the questions here, our first question is, what does the ADA mean to you? We're coming up on the 30th anniversary, and what does that mean to you?
Well, the Americans with Disabilities Act, it was passed when I was like 2, I guess. So I don't know that I lived in a world without it, per se, at least in the USA. So the way that I've been able to understand kind of what it actually is doing is by the fact that I have been lucky enough to travel overseas. And I will just say that I definitely know there is no ADA there. Historical buildings don't even think about being able to enter them. And they don't care that you can't enter it. It's really not of their concern. And so for me, the ADA brings freedom. It creates understanding for me, and then also to be able to educate even just my regular friends on saying things like, hey, if we're at a mall and there's a second floor, we really need an elevator. Those things that people without disabilities do not think of, the ADA kind of gives them that reminder. And so the ADA for me kind of encompasses quite a bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you already touched on it, but we wanted to ask you, what are some barriers that you think exist in the current ADA? Because obviously it's not perfect. So what are some barriers that you've encountered with the ADA?
Well, yes. Okay. Definitely the ADA is not perfect at all, right? Nothing is. I think with any law, with any rule, with that, whatever it is that we would like to call it, there's always loopholes. And the loophole with ADA is well, maybe I just won't redo my building, or maybe I'll make it so that people with disabilities can sort of get in, but once they get in, I don't know if they're really going to be able to see my place or be able to even the simplest thing, which drives me insane, is the fact that we are fully able to go to grocery stores, but what are we supposed to do? Either always go with our friend or, hopefully we're not completely embarrassed by someone randomly following us with a basket. Why hasn't that been figured out yet? So I think the ADA is doing awesome things, but some of the barriers that it presents are like simple, everyday things. I may be able to have an accessible apartment, but not every friend of mine is given the luxury of living in an apartment that has an elevator, or being able to say, hey, I actually have a friend with a disability, so I need to be on the first floor. They don't care about those things. And I think sometimes the barriers that the ADA presents are in fact those little kind of, I would say, slick loopholes that are things that if you are not living it, you don't think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's like so cool about things like this podcast, is it's going to show people things that, like you said, they don't necessarily think about. So kind of along those lines, like, can you think of a time when like the ADA has specifically helped you, and then maybe one time when it hasn't and it's kind of fallen short of what it's supposed to do?
Definitely. Doing things in the disability community, I will say that I've seen so much more of the power of the ADA, and a lot of that power just literally comes from the fact that before the ADA, we could have complained, we could have made noise, but no one cared about that noise, and no one paid attention to that noise. Now there are dedicated places, there are dedicated people that are literally hired to care about what we are saying. So I do think that the ADA does an amazing job with that, the giving us the voice there. But it kind of fails us in that one of the jokes that I hear a lot with people with disability is we have safety in numbers, but we also always need backup. You always want to have someone with you that's just a little bit louder and just a little bit more aggressive, because if you go by yourself, they're going to say whatever and move you right along. But if you bring a friend, okay, now there are witnesses, so they kind of have to pay attention a little bit more. So I do think that's probably something that the ADA should work on.
So we're coming up on 30 years, and it's been almost 30 years, right? So how do you hope that the ADA changes and evolves within the next 10 to 20 years? What do you hope that you see?
Well, for me, I hope that it is world changing. I hope that people with disabilities are given the ability to travel. It's something that I long to do, but because I have been overseas, I'm terrified to do, because I know that it doesn't matter over there. So I hope that it becomes more of a worldwide thing. And then too, I also hope that we are more intelligent about the ways to use it, and that we listen to one another so that it can be done effectively.
Yeah, to your point of listening to one another, that's like a key point with anything. Instead of, just jumping and acting on things, I really feel that people with disabilities need to be listened to more. They need to be brought into those conversations of how do we construct this building or universal design. It's all about listening. And if people are willing to listen, that's half the battle.
Yeah, because, to your point earlier, Shevie, a lot of people just don't think about different accessibility needs and barriers that might exist because they don't live with a disability. So they don't know that, hey, wait, yeah, there's a ramp there, but it may be too steep. Or maybe that bathroom that's technically ADA compliant isn't actually wide enough. So yeah, I think like you were saying, Drew, just having, those of us who have disabilities and making sure that it's different kinds of disabilities and equipment that people use so that everything's, thought of. I think that's the key, to just kind of make sure people are aware and are thinking of everything as things are being built.
Yeah, I think like we've kind of said, it's like so easy for people to overlook the small things that like other people don't even have to think about. So like opening doors in and out and like things that everyone else can do so easily, that's like so hard for us. I think it's so easy for like people building buildings and stuff to just like overlook all those small things. Just so from your perspective, do you think there's a difference between like compliance with the ADA and accessibility? Or are they the same thing?
I actually very much think that they're very different. Just specifically in the apartment that I live in, I actually live in a townhouse that has 2 floors and 15 steps that lead to my bedroom. Now, they're completely compliant with the ADA because I guess I could move my bedroom downstairs if I really wanted to, but it's completely not accessible because my kitchen, my laundry, everything is downstairs. So I have to go back and forth at some point, so it's simple things like that it's just ridiculous. Someone may in fact build a makeshift ramp, that might work or might not. And their idea is, well, at least you can get up there. Maybe not, and maybe that's like the smallest ramp I've ever seen in life. And I hope no one else has a bigger wheelchair. So I do think there's a definite difference. And it really, again, just goes back to who is deciding what that difference is. A lot of the issues, I think, and it's, it's like a little nitpick of mine that I'm always so curious to see, well, who's making these decisions that are affecting me? And if it's people like me, then high five. If it's not, then I know there's going to be some problems because they don't live that life. So.
Yeah, and so that's all for that point. Robin and I live here at Cypress Hall here at the University of Florida, and it's only one of 2 completely fully accessible ADA dorms in the country with a walk-in roll-in shower, features that control the blinds and doors. And I totally get where you're coming from, Chevy, because I did it backwards. I've been in Gainesville for a total of 5 years now, crazy to think. But for 3 of those years, I lived in an apartment setting, and for 23 years prior to coming to a state-of-the-art facility like Cypress, I had to get in and out of the bathtub head first. And let me tell you, I only have a year left here at the University of Florida, and I'm just so nervous about, having to go backwards as far as that accessibility. And I just don't get it. We're in 2020, and why do we have to fight for something as simple as a roll-in shower, something that is safe for us to, bathe and things like that. It's just crazy. But I know that God has a plan, and eventually, things will change.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm in Cypress with them as well, but I'm home for the summer. But it's my senior year coming up, and people keep asking me like, "Oh, are you gonna move off campus for your senior year?" And sure, I think it would be like awesome to like live in a house or an apartment with some friends, but like I don't think it's possible because literally I don't think there's many apartment complexes in Gainesville that have elevators. So it's just like it would be great, but it's not accessible. So I'm just so thankful for things like Cypress that have gone above and beyond just complying, but like making things accessible.
Yeah, and hopefully, now that Cypress is here and there's the other one, I think at the University of Illinois, hopefully now that there are these kinds of facilities, like that'll kind of start a conversation and people will look around and go, hey, wait, like, why don't we have something like that? And hopefully, because I think with stuff like this, like awareness is the first step to creating change. So hopefully now that there are to facilities like this, that they'll just kind of start being more widespread and more easily accessible to everyone. So Chevy, even though there's still progress to be made, kind of like we were just talking about, what's something that you think should be celebrated about the ADA?
I mean, it should be celebrated that it exists, because, as I mentioned, I know what it's like when it doesn't, and just the mere fact that the ADA is here, it is in fact causing conversation and decisions to be made, whether they're right or wrong. Well, but it's causing conversation, even if it is only for a week. It's something. It's better than what we were getting, you know. And I think that we can be thankful for that, at least.
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned, like, you know what it's like to be in a place where the ADA is not there. Can you kind of describe what a day is like in a country or in a place where there's not the ADA law, and kind of compare that to what it's like living here with the ADA law?
Well, well, lots of my overseas travel has happened like in the Caribbean and, you know, I guess some of the smaller ports of the world, but it, you know, I don't necessarily wake up every day thinking, gosh, you know, how am I going to get out of this bed? How am I going to take a shower? How am I going to walk out my door? But in the worst way, like when you are overseas and nobody thinks about this, you are in fact wondering those things. You know, you're 20 something years old and your first thought is, crap, well, I hope so and so didn't leave, because otherwise I'm going to be stuck here all day, you know, in this situation. And thank God at the time I was tiny, because I couldn't imagine being fat and having to be lifted over the beautiful steps, you know.
Girl,
So,
I feel that every day. I'm like, you need to get in the gym, because if you get any bigger, I don't know how you're gonna be able to lift yourself like you do.
right,
So,
and you know, there are just so many questions that you have to ask yourself, and even where do you go for lunch? Well, you don't go anywhere, because you not only have to deal with the fact that it's not accessible, people are very, very vocal about the fact that you have a disability, and they're going to tell you about it, and they're going to tell whoever you're with about it, and they're going to tell them where they should leave you, you know. And it's quite, I mean, coming from someone who knows none of that life, when I say it is shocking. I wish that I was exaggerating, you know. I'm a pretty independent person who's like, whatever, don't worry about it. But there's no way. I mean, I think I'd probably be in jail, because I'd be like, who do you think you're talking to? Wondering these things. But it's a culture, and the culture there and in many of the countries is that people with disabilities are like, you know, the worst, and they're either cursed or demonized or something. So then, you know, you have holy water being thrown on you, and I love Jesus, but I'm pretty sure he didn't do any of that. So it's definitely a intense vibe, but I'm glad that I went there when I was younger. But I think it was a little easier to shield me from that, I guess. But going there as an older person, it's just shocking. It's just like, wait, people say this stuff like out loud. It makes you appreciate the USA just a little, you know. So, and you know, even if that were to happen here, because who am I to say that it doesn't? I mean, I actually very recently had the weirdest encounter ever, and I was very shocked by people's reactions to it. You know, once again, quite independent, went out to get my nails done, and it's a nail place I've been to before. They've always been very accommodating. Well, I dropped a lovely earpod underneath my wheelchair, so I was looking for it, and as I was looking for it, the manager of the store came up and began to move my scooter with me inside of it. So suddenly I just felt this jolt, and here she is moving me around her store without my permission, without me being prepared. And so I fly out of the chair. And, you know, I thought to myself in that very instance, like, is this America? Is this what we do? You know, and even though I still encounter things like that, I honestly would take that over holy water being thrown, because even when I was able to nicely articulate why in the heck you would not want to do that to a person's wheelchair, she listened, and she didn't have to. She could have been like, get out of my store and forget about it, which that was not the case. She was very apologetic, and I'll probably be getting my nails done for free for life, but you know, so definitely huge difference.
Yeah, and kind of to your point about like there just being a culture difference, and you kind of noticing that and things people said when you were over in the Caribbean. I kind of noticed that to an extent here at the University of Florida as compared to other campuses that I visited, because there was one campus that I went to in particular where I was interviewing for scholarship, and you know, they weren't quite as accessible and had the level of accommodation that UF did. And I just remember, like, there were times during that day when I felt really uncomfortable because it was so kind of obvious that the people around me hadn't really interacted with people with disabilities quite as much. And then I remember coming here and just feeling so welcome and so at home. And I think the presence of Cypress and the fact that there are more people with disabilities on this campus, I think that really, you know, played a big role in that. Drew and Jordan, did you guys kind of notice something similar whenever you came to UF?
Yeah, and I would say, even just to speak on like the presence of Cypress, like I love living in Cypress because it's like we're all kind of one community that like understand what each other goes through every day. And that's like the first time where I've like known people that like get it. When I come home and like say I've had a hard day because things weren't accessible, like you guys get it because you go through the same thing. So I think even just like, yeah, making places more accessible and like creating more places like Cypress where people can get to know other people with disabilities, like I think that would make a huge difference, just because like I think camaraderie is huge, and like we have that with each other and like living in the same place.
And to speak on that, you know, Cyprus, there's a sense of community like none other. Just to speak on it a little bit, growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends with disabilities, and I, you know, tried to fit in the friend group with quote unquote normal people, but we all know there's no such thing as normal, right? But Cyprus was the first time that I've really had that sense of community with like a lot of people with disabilities. And yes, there's lots of us with cerebral palsy on the floor, but you know, each story is different. Even though we have the same condition, we can relate, but there's also some differences about our story as well. So that's just very cool to see that no one disability is the same, even if you have the same diagnosis. You have me, who is in a wheelchair. You have Robin, who is in a walker, and then you have you, Jordan, who's on crutches. So that's three varying levels of disability, and also, you know, Chevy in another form. So we're all unique in our own little way, even though we have the same diagnosis. And you know, I don't know what I will do without the sense of community and the sense of home and the sense of, just like you were saying, if you're having a bad day due to some disability related stuff, you have people on this floor that get it. And I wish that there was a way that we could cultivate that more in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's something that people kind of tend to not realize about disability, is that it is very individualized. I think they kind of take everyone who has disability sometimes and kind of group us all together, and sometimes tend to put all of us in one box, and that's not the case. Like you were saying, it's very individualized. And Chevy, is that kind of something that you've talked to people about as you've been Miss Wheelchair Florida and kind of had that platform to do that?
Well, I would say that I don't know that I talk to people about it, but it is something that I have tried to create. And I'll explain what that means. So for me, I feel like as an adult, I took a path and I got here. And people see what I've done, or they watch what I'm doing and they want to know how. So my whole thought has been to try and create that community with some of the younger ones coming up, because there was just so much as a kid that I wished, man, if I had somebody that had, CP when I was growing up, who knows what I would have been thinking? Who knows what I would have asked? And so I really, really, really tried to join them together, and to realize, like, you're not alone. However, more and more and more, I hear that there are a lot of, I won't even say just adults, because I don't even know what that means, but I would say a lot of the younger adults, that are kind of already, college or just out there in the world, are also, I will say, longing for it, needing it, and we should have it. It's one of the things that I absolutely love about the fact that I was Miss Wheelchair Florida. It was instant community, and something I've never had, honestly, before I was a part of Miss Wheelchair Florida. I don't think that I even had more than one friend who was a girl. So the whole being around stronger women, and then you threw in the fact that we all were riding around in wheelchairs, pretty awesome and pretty cool. So it's something that I think is important, and something that I am working to get. But it's quite hard to do, because sometimes, based on our disabilities, we're really closed off. We don't necessarily want to tell people certain things, and that's because of lots of things, I'm sure, in society, and how we're told to be strong. So if at any point we're quote unquote not, then we're not measuring up with the rest of the world. So it's something that's necessary. It can happen, and it's something that personally I am working towards.
Awesome. That's a great answer, Shevie. So there's 4 tireless disability advocates on this call, and we fight every day for inclusion and equality. But what is something that you think the able-bodied community could do to advocate for the ADA as well as people with disabilities?
Well, I absolutely think that people without disabilities, I will say that it takes a lot for me to call them able-bodied, because I don't think there's anything wrong with my body. So I'm conflicted on that term. But people without disabilities, they're people. They have feelings like we have feelings. And so something that I've noticed a lot is the closer that I get to people, the more they realize. And sometimes they realize it even before I would say it. Things like, well, why doesn't Olive Garden have this by the door? Or why aren't there push buttons? It becomes something that's innate in them. So I think they too can fight those battles. They too can speak up. It doesn't always have to be us. Because now, as we venture out and as we try to be in the world, they get to see what our world is like. And honestly, sometimes they have a lot more passion than we do, because, by the time we get to about 30, we pretty much quit arguing about there being a ramp at the front of the building. Just because we're like, you know what, how many more times can I yell about this? Whereas it's something new for them. Or if somebody gives you a weird look, it's something new for them. So they may approach it almost way more passionate than we would. So I think that they play an important role, as long as they aren't taking it over for us. It has to be something that is genuine and isn't like, here they come to rescue the poor little disabled people, because that's a no.
Yeah, I
And I
totally agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think kind of to your point, the whole like able-bodied and disability, like there being a difference, I think that's a big step that we could take. And I didn't even think about it until you said it, Chevy, of like, you know, we're all people. So like, let's just say that instead of there being able-bodied and disability, and there's nothing, like you said, there's nothing wrong with our bodies. So I think that even that and the verbiage that we use would be a huge step, and just putting everyone on the same playing field, and, you know.
Exactly. And those terms, you know, people first language, people with disabilities versus special needs. There's a war between those terms too, you know. There's even us, you know, we all have disabilities, but we all have a difference of opinion with what language do we use. You know, what may have been me may not have been Chevy, or what may have been Chevy may not have been Robin. And I think it would be very nice and inclusive if we could all coin one term or one way that fits all. But it's you know, hopefully we can move towards that as we progress.
Yeah, and just to our point about like people without disabilities like advocating for us too. I think one big thing for me has just been like being honest with my friends who don't have disabilities, and kind of like letting them into my life so they can see the small things that I struggle with. So like Chevy was saying, that they just become more aware of the things just by being around me. So I think an important thing is just to like show people, because obviously like they don't know that like opening a door is like really hard for me because it's not hard for them. But like how can I expect them to like just know that because they don't live it? So I think an important thing we could do is to just make people more aware, but like in a good way, you know, just by like kind of like just living our life around them, but like openly, if that makes sense. But Chevy, do you have any advice for people in like advocating for ourselves? Because there's obviously going to be times where we do have to speak up and like stand up for ourselves. So do you have any advice for like being your own advocate?
Absolutely. And I will say that you know, there are people that I meet that I'm like, well, golly, I'm on the low totem pole there with that. But I think everybody has something to say, something that they are passionate about. And I guess that my way of dealing with advocacy has evolved, I'd say. Just in the general, the fact of, we're people, we all gotta live here. This is all have to work. We all have to make it somehow. So if that's the case, if I see something that isn't going to work for a baby, I'd say, hey, maybe you shouldn't hold that baby upside down. You know, something simple and silly like that, I'd say something. So I feel like when it comes to choosing what we fight about, we need to consider, like, what is this going to change? If I say something about this one thing, what's going to happen? And we have to understand that it might not be monumental. You know, you may not be the lady who complains about McDonald's cup not saying hot. You might not win that case, but it will change someone, something, somewhere, and they heard you say it, and they're like, well, you know what? She did say that trying to get into this store is really hard because the wheels don't fit, and I don't want my stuff to get messed up by her wheels, so I'm gonna make the aisles just a little bit, you know, wider. And so it doesn't have to be a fight every time. It can literally be a discussion. It can literally be, hey, how can we make this work together? And I find that in my role as an advocate, you can get so much more done just by having a conversation, honestly. A lot of the times when you come at things aggressively or passionately, it turns people off instantly. So if you've taken the time to sit down and almost solve the situation yourself, you can go into a movie theater and constantly complain, hey, the seats are too close, the seats are too close. Well, if you go in there that fifth time, you're like, hey, so if you move this right like this will work. I've never had anybody say to me, well, I'm not going to do that. That's never happened, because people don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be corrected. So if you make it a situation where they feel like they're changing something and you're doing it together, you can get a lot more done.
I definitely concur with that statement, Chevy. Instead of, going in there with fire, instead of presenting, hey, this is a problem. Well, instead of just presenting the problem, we should also try to present a solution. Hey, this is a problem, but here's some ways we can work together to fix it, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And just a final question, Chevy, just kind of tie everything that we've talked about today up into a bow. If what's one piece of advice or encouragement that you would want someone living with a disability to know?
Oh wow, that's a good one. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I like that question. Well, I guess I'd want them to know that bad days happen, good days happen. Sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're happy, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to just be you. Not everybody is going to be I don't want to say brave enough, but it feels like that's the only word that I can come up with at the moment. Not everyone is meant for the spotlight. Some wars are fought in different ways, and that's okay. Something that a younger person with a disability asked me, and it sort of shook me. I was kind of like, what? Why would you say that? And I now understand. She asked me, well, what if I don't want to fight? And I was like, well, what are you fighting for here? But she just said, well, what if I just want to be 12? And I said, you know what? Then just be 12. Because at some point, we're all not fighters, we're all not boxers or anything like that. But at some point, something's going to happen where you speak up and you do it in your own way, and that's okay. It's okay to just to be you. So I think that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much. I'm glad that I have you in my corner, and I know that now that I've introduced you to my friends Jordan and Robin, you will also be in their corner. And I'm so thankful, and I value your friendship.
Indeed, I value your friendship as well, and definitely, young ladies, I don't meet a lot of strong disability advocates all the time that I want to keep in my corner, but definitely don't lose my number or my email. If anything's going on in the world and you just need someone to be like, so today this is not the best, definitely know that I'm here, and we have lots of things upcoming that we can definitely use lots of people like all of you.